Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, he's recording?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of Yes Committee meeting. My name is Wendy Hewlett-Betts, and I am the chair of the ad hoc. The time is now 6:15, so we will get started. I would like the committee and guests to introduce themselves, starting from my right.
My name is Malcolm Gray. I am a member of the committee.
Nate Heffron, a senior planner with the Department of City Planning in the Bronx office.
Robert Press, Community Committee member.
Paul Phillips, Board Director of Bronx Office Department of City Planning.
Michael Task, local resident.
Thank you and welcome.
I know we have oral on.
And Oral, you're online. Can you hear us?
Like to drive it.
Okay, very good. So we're gonna move along. We have a presentation, so we want to get started with that. And so, by all means.
Great. Can everyone that's online hear me? Okay. Just get a quick mic check just to make sure that everyone can hear. And everyone can see the presentation too, right?
If you can hear, give a thumbs up so we can at least
If it
see.
comes up.
Okay, very good, Sam.
And can you see the presentation also?
Can you hear? Can you see?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we're good.
You put this example for your
Okay.
mark volume.
Great. So thank you all for having us tonight. We're here to present the third of three City of Yes citywide text amendments. The first one was City of Yes for carbon neutrality, which sought to change our zoning to make our to allow for our buildings to be more environmentally friendly. Then we had zoning for economic opportunity, which tried to change our zoning to make our zoning more friendly for small businesses throughout the city, and to help encourage economic growth post-COVID. And now we're here for the third and final text amendment, which is City of Housing Opportunity, which seeks to remove zoning barriers to help increase the amount of housing production to face in the face of the housing crisis that we're dealing with today. So next slide.
Sorry.
So this is a citywide text amendment. It's with the goal of trying to encourage a little bit more housing in every neighborhood, because there's a few opportunities out there right now with when it comes to housing production. It's really lagging behind the population growth of New York City. It's also lagging behind the job growth in the city, and we have some graphs that'll show that coming up in a bit. You can go to the next slide, please. So what is this housing crisis that I mentioned, and what we've been hearing about, and it's been talked about quite a bit here in the city. And one of the common questions or comments we hear a lot, that New York City has always really been in a housing crisis, but it's just gotten gradually worse and just incrementally worse as the decades have gone on. And right now, one of the main statistics that we use to really see where our situation is the apartment vacancy rate. And right now it's at 1.41% for the entire city, which is the lowest that it's been since 1968. It's approaching historic lows. And it's even lower in the Bronx at 0.82%. So that means less than 1% of all apartments that are out there are vacant right now. And in the city, over 50% of renters are rent burdened, which means they spend more than 30% of their income on rent. So that's not a good thing either. We have also over 92,000 homeless New Yorkers, including more than 33,000 children who are sleeping in the shelter system on any given night since 2023. Next slide, please. So like I said before, New York City is not building enough housing to meet New Yorkers' needs. This graph shows just a decade by decade approach of how many housing units were built in each decade. And as you can see, in the first half of the 20th century, much more housing was built, but then it starts to level off after the 1960s. The population in New York had changed many times since then, but it's generally been on an upward increase in the last few decades. And as you can see in recent decades, that housing production has been near the lowest that it's been. So it's not keeping pace with the needs of the city. It's not keeping pace with the population growth, and it's really starting to put a lot of pressure on our city today. So a lot of this has to do with restrictive zoning rules that are in place as well. Next, please. And another common comment that we've also been hearing a lot is that there's lots of development already happening in the city. But it's only concentrated in very few neighborhoods. So we have 10 community boards that are producing more housing than the other 49 combined. And it's concentrated in these certain areas, and it's putting a lot of pressure on those areas. So what we want to do is to facilitate more production and more evenly distributed production throughout the entire city. And that's what we hope that these proposals will do. Next, please. So when we have fewer housing options, landlords gain leverage. So what this ends up being is it ends up resulting in higher rents. It ends up resulting in also higher just housing costs or purchase price costs for those purchasing homes. It ends up in winding up in displacement and gentrification pressure, segregation, homelessness, as I mentioned before, really poor housing quality, as landlords don't have as much interest in keeping up their properties for tenants, given that they don't have any options out there, and it also leads to tenant harassment by landlords as well. And that statistic of rent burden New Yorkers, it's even higher in the Bronx at 60%. So this has direct consequences, direct human consequences for folks in New York. So what this could end up looking like, and what this does look like, is that people will have longer commutes to their jobs. They'll have to live farther away to find more affordable housing, or if people need to leave a housing situation for whatever reason, if they have to leave an unsafe home, they have no other choice but to turn to a homeless shelter. A college graduate might want to move back to their home neighborhood, but they don't have any options that are affordable or available to them. And people also just end up leaving the city altogether, which is something that folks are doing as well. Next, please. And this also has impacts for the economy too. So the housing crisis ends up slowing down job growth and hurts the city's economy. That people will have less disposable income to work with. It also means in fewer jobs for construction and residential maintenance. And we believe that the proposals will end up resulting in billions of dollars of added value to the city's economy, and hundreds of thousands of jobs that could come about from this as well. Next, please. Actually, it's a little awkward kind of presenting to the back of people. We might just switch over to
Yes, that's
the other
fine.
side because also for folks out there, we have handouts too for the pass them around. Thank you. I'll just say yours. Let's see the presentation and present too.
How are you?
Can I sit there?
Yeah.
So what we want to talk about today is this is a zoning text amendment, and zoning is one tool of many that we have at our disposal. And there's different tools that are out there. We're joined today by HPD, our esteemed colleagues at HPD, that also have numerous tools in their kit to address the housing affordability and the housing crisis. But one thing that zoning is that it can do is it can include requirements for income restricted housing. It does not actually directly build or fund new housing development. It doesn't force anything to be built, but it's a tool that's within the city's control. But other tools out there are like tax subsidies for to incentivize affordable housing. There's also home ownership programs that are out there as well, and also tenant protection programs. And I think we were also really excited to see at the state level that in the most recent state budget that there were some new housing measures that were passed there that will also complement what City of Housing Opportunity is proposing. So with this crisis, we're trying to get at it from every angle possible. So zoning is just one important piece, but it's not the only piece of this. Next, please. So before we get into the proposals themselves, I want to just take a moment to just share like how our current residential zoning looks in New York City. And we have some maps that'll show you the breakdown of the district a little bit later on, but Community Board 11 has a combination of what we call like low density and high density districts. And if any folks are not familiar with like the terminology that we use in the handout here for the illustrated guide City for Housing Opportunity has, I believe on page 4, a list of terms that we can refer back to if there's anything that I share that you don't understand, or if a term that needs clarification, please feel free to stop me at any point throughout this. But when we mean density, we mean about the number of people living in a particular area or particular fixed amount of area. So low density would look more like what you see on the left of this diagram, which are our R1 through R5 districts, R standing for residential, of course. And the bigger the number, the higher up you go. So your single family zoning is your R1s and your R2s for your single family detached houses. And then it goes up to your R3s, R4s, R5s, where you get more like row houses, small apartment buildings, things like that. And then we get into what we call like the medium and high density range from R6 to R10, where you start to have like more of the 6-story apartment buildings and getting all the way up to the high rise type of buildings as well. We actually don't have any R10 districts in the Bronx anywhere. There's just one small R9 district way over in the West Bronx. So those are more dense, higher density in the in Manhattan, Long Island City, water.
I'm sorry, that piano district is not now in R9s?
No, actually, believe it or not,
No?
it's not.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's just to frame the conversation. So like the proposals themselves are grouped into 2 buckets. They're or 3 buckets really. There are the low density proposals, the medium high density proposals, and then ones that apply citywide as well. Next, please. So how can zoning help address this housing crisis? So what we're trying to do is allow for more housing to be built in every neighborhood across the city. And what we wanted to do, how we want to do this is just by addressing the barriers that prevent housing from being built in the first place. So and we also want to do this approach so that it doesn't burden any neighborhood in particular. Also, one thing to note is that these proposals will only apply to new construction. So this is not an upzoning. This is not rezoning any district. This isn't changing any particular zoning district in any neighborhood through this text amendment. So what we want to do this to address the root causes of the high housing.
Excuse me.
Yes.
However, once you have one building go up that's out of context, there's nothing to prevent any other buildings to go up that are out of context, correct?
They still should be within like the.
And I'll use the
context.
example of Community Board 8. Oxford Avenue had a 14-story building go up. Then it had a second 14-story building go up a couple of years later. And now it has a 17-story building going up because it was able to get the bonus height because it has 25% affordable housing. And had it put in a community facility, it could have gotten 3 more stories and gone up 20 stories, correct?
I'm not familiar with that particular.
Then you want to handle it? Because it's in your neighborhood.
I think you're associating,
The Stag Building.
I don't agree, but.
Newton, who was with city planning, told me it could go 20 stories.
You're saying if one big building goes up, and others, it's.
Well, you've got-
All the means is that if they were eligible for it to begin with. I mean,
How did the first 14-story building go up on Oxford?
I don't know, I'm not familiar.
So let's, with the,
What's gonna happen?
I would say let's save questions for the end
Okay.
because it's the presentation is quite lengthy.
Mhm.
So we just want to,
Yeah.
let's jot our questions down.
You can go to the next slide. So here's overall just a summary of what the proposals are. So again, our low density proposals would apply to those low density areas, which are in blue on the map, and then the medium high density ones in the yellow orange color on the map. And then the citywide proposals apply everywhere. So our low density proposals, we want to allow for more what we call missing middle housing. That's we call it missing middle because it addresses a need for housing for more like middle class, middle income people and households. We also want to help homeowners by allowing for more flexibility and to introduce the ability to create accessory dwelling units. Our medium high density proposals want to introduce a new program called the Universal Affordability Preference. And then we also have proposals around parking and other citywide actions, which we'll get into more detail. The next slide. And then these are the how the proposal would apply to Community Board 11, again in the blue, most of your low density areas, so a lot of single family, multifamily housing zoning there. As you have Morris Park, Van Ness, like Pelham Gardens, and then you have some more higher density areas over closer to like White Plains Road, like that Pelham Parkway sort of area. Next week. Go to the next. So we'll start with the low density proposals. So because of how restrictive our zoning is, a lot of building types that you would see in these types of pictures that are common throughout New York City would not be allowed today under today's current zoning. We wouldn't be able to see new buildings like the one on the left, small apartment buildings or buildings built on top of commercial corridors like on the right. So we want to sort of like re-legalize these and bring these types of building styles back because these types of buildings can help provide that sort of like missing middle type of housing. Next, please. And this is so the districts and the areas where it would apply across Community Board 11. Okay. So the first of these proposals, what we call town center zoning. This would bring back a building type that, again, like we had, this wouldn't be allowed given how restrictive today's zoning is. And a lot of places like along like Morris Park Avenue, for example, already have this type of housing where you have a commercial corridor with no more than like 2, 3, 4 stories of housing built on top. Again, this wouldn't require or force any new construction. It would just allow this type of housing to be brought back if new development were to occur in the future. And then next, please. And this shows some of the commercial corridors that where it would be eligible. So of course, like along Morris Park Avenue, Williamsburg Road, some on like Eastchester Road. These are the types of areas, but where, of course, like along Morris Park, most of Morris Park already has this type of housing. And if in the future a new one particular lot wanted to redevelop, they wouldn't be forced to just they wouldn't be inhibited by the requirements that are there today. That would prevent that type of building from being built. Next, please. And then another the next proposal would be to allow for more what we call transit-oriented development and allowing for more density in closer proximity to mass transit. So our subway lines and our Metro North lines in the Bronx. So in the areas shaded in purple would be areas that would, if the lots met a particular criteria, they would be eligible to construct a small modest apartment building like the one in the picture here. I'm gonna go to the next slide. So these
Wait, all right, okay, okay.
so these sites they would have to meet these criteria of being within a half-mile of a transit station. They would have to be at least 5,000 square feet in size, and they'd have to either be on the short end of a block or a wide street, which we define as being wider than 75 feet or wider, so that they aren't crowding, tight, narrow streets. They'd be mid-block. They won't be in places where people aren't walking distance to transit. So there would be, the next one. This just shows the low density zoning areas where the low density zoning areas close to the transit, but not every single site in this area would be eligible for this. So like they have to meet that same criteria to be in this zone, not over 5,000 or over 5,000 square feet, and either on the short end of a block or a wide street. Excellent. So we also have proposals that intend to help homeowners to give them more flexibility to do more with their homes. The first proposal is to allow for homeowners to add an accessory dwelling unit or an ADU. This is something that a lot of other cities and municipalities across the city have done with a lot of success. And this would look like something along the lines of either is like in the image, a garage conversion or an attic conversion or a basement conversion. And this would of course allow folks to either be able to add an extra unit to generate more income or to allow their elderly family members to age in place or to provide another housing unit for either their family or someone else. So and just an important thing to note about our ADU proposal is that we work closely with our sister agencies at the Department of Buildings, the Fire Department, the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice to ensure that there will be requirements for these accessory dwelling units to ensure their safety. For example, there won't be any basement apartments allowed in the coastal flood boundary. So there's other guidelines that will ensure that any new ADUs are also to provide a pathway for existing ones to be safe. Next, please. So we also want to adjust floor area ratio or FAR requirements, perimeter heights, yards, and other rules that don't give homeowners that much flexibility with their properties. These houses that you see here, they wouldn't be allowed under today's zoning because they're just too bulky, they're too close together, they don't provide enough side yards. So these would be at least like 2-family houses, but we wouldn't be able to build these today. So on a lot like this, if anything would be built, sometimes an empty lot wouldn't even be developed because the zoning is too restrictive. If something does develop, it winds up ending up being only a single family home instead of providing an additional unit because they can't work with the restrictive zoning as is. But also for those who already own a home like this, they also may have trouble securing financing from the bank if they want to do a renovation or expand their property because their building is already non-compliant with the zoning, and that can present issues to them as well. Next, please. So then we'll get into the medium and high density proposal. So we want to introduce a new program called the Universal Affordability Preference. So this would allow buildings to add at least 20% more housing in these medium and high density areas, so long as that extra floor area that is provides permanently affordable income restricted housing. So this would the intention behind this is to provide incremental affordable housing throughout the city in more areas. So next, please. And this concept builds upon an existing program that's in place called it's the Affordable Income Restricted Senior Housing, or AIRS, that allows for a floor area bonus in those types of areas. This would extend it to all permanent affordable housing. So it builds upon those guidelines that were already in place, but just expands the eligibility. There are certain areas that can participate in that program that will see that floor area bump, but other areas would just that currently aren't eligible for it would just see the 20% bump. And next. And these would be the areas where in Community Board 11 where this would apply. Again, more towards like, White Plains Road and that Elk Parkway areas. So this, when we talk about affordability here, there's, of course, we have to how will we measure the affordability? What would that affordability look like? So we'd have a permanent affordability requirement at 60% of the area median income, or AMI. Or anyone here familiar with the term AMI and
Area median.
Okay. So of course it's you know, we know it's not the best measure, but it's the measure set by the federal government that we have to abide by. So the UAP program will allow for income averaging as opposed to just having the affordability established at one income bracket. So I'll go to the next slide. We'll show a breakdown of it. So the UAP AMI income affordable income bracket would be at 60%, and it would allow for income averaging. So it would replace the existing framework, which is called voluntary exclusionary housing, which establishes affordability at 80% AMI, but it doesn't allow for income averaging. So any buildings that voluntarily participate in it, they would only provide the affordable units at that income range, and most people will either make too little, they might make too much. So there's not many people that would be able to take advantage of those units. And with universal affordability preference, that 60% as its average, a developer can provide either all those units at that 60% range, or they can provide some at 30, some at 90, some at 60, as long as it all averages. So they can provide more at a wider range, and even including the lower incomes as well, as long as it's balanced out. So it can provide a much more diverse range of incomes in those affordable units. Next, please. So like an example of how this would work, and we have a church here in an R6 district that would that wants to redevelop and put housing on top. So as it is today, they would be allowed a 3.0 floor area ratio, and based on this site, they would get about 35 units through that. But if they through the universal affordability preference, they would get a 3.9 FAR, which would result in an additional 10 to 12 units of housing. So 10 to 12 units on top of the 35, and so long as they're permanently affordable. And this is just an example of like what a building would look like. So on the left would be a building that could be built today in this particular example. And just to show on the right what it would look like with the universal affordability preference in terms of like the impact of the height and the bulk. It would only just result in about an additional 2 stories on what this 10-story building here. And our housing division planners did a calculation that if this program had been in place since 2014, the city would have generated an additional 20,000 income restricted units, enough to house 50,000 people, if this had been in place by as far back as 10 years. Next, please. All right, so we'll get into the citywide proposals next. And this one is everyone's favorite proposal. We are proposing ending parking mandates in our zoning. This is again another proposal that other cities have done to a lot of success, and our parking ends up adding higher costs to construction when it's required, when so many spaces are required. It does take up a lot of space. See in diagram, 2 spaces takes up about as much as a studio apartment. But what we want to do with this proposal is that we want zoning to sort of get out of the business of mandating parking and saying what is the appropriate amount of parking for a particular development or a particular neighborhood even. Can go to the next, please. And I know a lot of information has been out there about like what the parking proposal will do. It's again, this is only applies to new developments in the city. So if like an existing building, for example, wanted to remove their parking, they would still have to go to the city planning commission for approval to do that. This proposal, we want to simplify floor area exemptions related to parking spaces as well. And one thing I think is also really important here is that we want to help facilitate or allow more public use of what we call accessory parking. So the term accessory is a kind of defined in a very specific way in our zoning resolution. And as it is now, technically, say like a building develops a lot or a garage, they would have, the spaces technically have to be as an accessory use for the people that, for the residents that live in that building. So unless they go through the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection to officially make their garage like a public garage, they wouldn't be able to rent out those spaces to like other people in the neighborhood. So this would allow for more public use of that accessory parking for new development to actually be able to rent out those spots, whether or not it's just for the building, because we see in a lot of instances that a building it may be required to build a certain amount of spaces, but because they can't rent it out to everyone in the neighborhood, they may not be able to rent them out all those parking spaces to people in the building. So they end up just sitting there empty, and the cost that went into constructing them, and then they just end up going to waste. So that's what we want to help correct this type of situation. But and there's also some text in there to clean up Manhattan parking regulations as well. But what it won't do is that it won't change on-street parking regulations. That's under the jurisdiction of city DOT. It wouldn't be changing any of that. It wouldn't be changing off-street parking regulations for commercial or industrial buildings. It wouldn't impose parking maximums or restrictions on the amount of parking that can be built. So it'd be up to any developer of any new building to determine what is the right level of parking that's appropriate for that development. And it doesn't, again, automatically remove any existing parking that would still exist. And it doesn't force anyone to not build parking. Next, please. We have we're able to find a couple of examples in Community Board 11 that where this actually, we've seen development actually provide more parking that was required under the current zoning. So this project is 2560 Boston Road, generated 333 income restricted units. And they provided a garage with 117 spaces. Technically, they didn't have to provide any because they were close enough to transit, and since it was a 100% income restricted building, but they still ended up providing 117 spaces.
1 second. That's hypothetically. So I don't believe this project is up currently. No.
Yeah,
It is been rezoned.
Rezone, right?
But
It's not
part of rezoning.
It's been changed already too.
It's seeking financing for our program,
Okay.
but yes, the numbers have changed significantly.
Okay. So everything that they will do in regards to the parking right now is just all hypothetical because that's not.
Well, that was their original proposal.
Okay.
Right. And what is it now?
They wanted to do over 400 units and somewhat less spaces.
Of spaces.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And then the next one. And thank you for clarifying that too. The next one is Blondell Commons. They provided significantly more parking than was required. Again, 182 units, all of which are income restricted. And technically they only had to provide 27 under the current zone.
Again, here, the Westchester Square merchants were getting 100 spaces. That's why they provided extra parking. And Westchester merchants gave the approval for that. They, provided the support for that. That's why you have the extra parking.
Again, it's responding to the demand in the neighborhood, though. It's that there was a request that the extra spaces were needed because it was needed in this particular area, and it was still provided, and even though it wasn't required based on the zoning. Next. And then the other citywide proposals that we have, the first being we want to enable conversion of underutilized buildings in the city. So as we know, a lot of office spaces are going underutilized these days because of more people working from home. So we want to expand our adaptive reuse regulations to a wider area. They're only limited to certain parts of the city. We want to expand it citywide, and we want to expand the eligibility date for these buildings from 1961 to 1991. So buildings that are only in a certain area, like office buildings that want to convert to residential. Today, if they're within a certain geography, mostly like Manhattan, and built before 1961, they can convert. but we want to expand that eligibility so more office buildings can convert. And not just office buildings as well, but like other types of buildings that are that want to convert to residential, like say like an old school building or an old church that might want to convert to residential. This will help expand their eligibility and facilitate that as well. We want to re-legalize small and shared apartments. So we want to eliminate this very abstract zoning rule called the dwelling unit factor, either reduce it or eliminate it in certain areas. Because this number called the dwelling unit factor tells you the average minimum size of your apartment square footage in a particular building. So that number is higher, it ends up meaning that a building has to construct more larger apartments, like 2-3 bedrooms or more. So we want to eliminate or reduce that in certain areas to allow for more smaller units to be built, because a lot of people in the city want to live by themselves, but they find themselves having to be in like roommate situations. So a lot of the young people especially end up getting into roommate situations, taking away those 2, 3, or 4 bedroom apartments away from families because they have to split the rent and they can't afford to live on their own. So, and that's also a function of just like not having enough studios and 1 bedrooms out there. So we want to allow for buildings to include more studio and 1 bedroom apartments to respond to that need, so that we free up those 2 and 3 bedroom and bigger apartments for families that actually need them. And then we also want to eliminate barriers to contextual infill. So this is we want to remove the zoning barriers that might prevent buildings from being built on campus open spaces, like kind of like NYCHA campuses, but not limited to just NYCHA campuses. It could be other collections of buildings or other large sites that have open spaces that can accommodate a new building, but of course providing guidelines so that it fits within the context of those campuses. Okay. So those are our major proposals. So then we think that these proposals will allow for that increase in just like a small amount of housing throughout the city. We acknowledge that like some neighborhoods have been constructing a lot of housing, and that it's still not enough, that we need more housing in all parts of the city, that there's a great need everywhere in every corner of the city and across all types of all walks of life needed as well. And we think that these proposals will result in a small amount of housing that won't put too much pressure on any one neighborhood. And we also did a full environmental impact statement that's also available on our website. So that we did a study to see how this would impact the city on just a citywide basis. So I invite you to take a look at that on our website as well if you want to really get into the details of it. But we also want to make clear that this isn't a rezoning. This isn't an upzoning of every neighborhood. If anything, we want to provide more flexibility for our zoning to allow it to do what it's supposed to do, and allow for housing to actually be developed, which it's currently preventing at this time in many instances. So
I'm sorry, I just have a question. So when the study was done, who was included in that study?
the environmental impact study,
Mm-hmm.
it's
And the reason why I'm asking is, so, I deal with affordable housing, right? So I'm wondering if the survey included those entrepreneurs, those developers that are really in the trenches of affordable housing, to tell you what some of the issues are as far as development and tenancy on that side.
Oh, no, that's a really good question. We well, not necessarily for the environmental impact statement. That was has a sort of a different type of methodology of how that was conducted, but the proposals themselves were put together through more than 2 years of outreach, reaching out to many of the housing advocacy organizations throughout the city. And the plan was also based off of an HPD plan called Where We Live NYC. That's what the initial plan that really started to sort of like set the stage for like these proposals, and like what the identifying like what the needs of the city are across the entire city for when it comes to housing.
Right, because I guess my fear is that it's the same old people that are at the table, the Monotnox, the L&Ms, that the NYUs, the new schools, those are the same people at the table that are telling you about what's going on in the community. And that's not really reality, right? So I just ask that when you do studies, include the NEP entrepreneurs, the NRP entrepreneurs, all of those who were city homes, all of those who were part of programs back in the 90s, flipping the neighborhoods, making them what they are today. That's my only concern, is that I know that the same old players are sitting at the table giving advice.
Like, we have like a full list of the organizations that we
I know.
out to.
I know some of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
many of them in the Bronx too.
Mhm.
And we can go to the next slide just to wrap up and we can really get into the questions here. So the last slide I have is just about the timeline next steps. So if any questions come up that after today that you might have, you can reach out to housingopportunity@planning.nyc.gov. Of course, we can also share all the materials that we have today, the Housing Opportunity Guide booklet. We also have additional resources on our website, including that draft environmental impact statement, the annotated zoning text itself, if you want to actually get into the actual text of like what's being taken out, what's being added. There are also like one pagers, past recordings of info sessions, all available on our website, which we can follow up and share with you. So you can have as much information as possible when you make your decision on this. And just in terms of like the timeline and the next steps, we're in the official 60-day community board review window. This text amendment was referred out on April 29th. So that would put the 60-day review window through May and June. Then this would be followed by a public hearing by the City Planning Commission sometime in July. The exact date has yet to be set, but the City Planning Commission would then vote expected in September, and then that would start a review window for the City Council, and we expect them to tentatively vote by the end of the year. Okay, so yeah, that concludes my presentation. So I thank you all for coming out and hearing us tonight. And I wanted to make sure that when we present that you have as much information as possible about what this text amendment will and will not do. We're happy to share all the resources that we have available. Take any questions that you have on this because we want you to know like what's actually going to be included and what's not included, and how and when you vote at the committee level, whether you can vote like with conditions or without or no, yes with conditions, no with conditions, and just to outline what you like about the proposal, what you don't like about the proposal, and just to make sure that that's grounded in like what the proposal is actually about. So
Understood. So I will take a couple of questions and then we'll get on to the next presentation.
Yeah,
So you have questions?
so it's a lot, but I just gonna touch on ones that I think should be. Well, one comment I'll say is I think part of the issue with understanding the city of Yes is understanding how the specific zoning changes look in actuality within our districts if used to their max ability, right? Just off of this quick question, like for low density communities, like what is the zoning that you're looking at for housing in regards? Like is it R6A? Are you trying to keep it R5? Like what are we looking at?
So like an R5 would stay an R5.
Okay.
So the difference would be is that if there would be like a new development in the R5, again, like anything existing, unless someone felt compelled to tear down the building and build something new, and anything that I don't imagine that would happen because what the small incremental gain that they would get would probably not work out financially, but this would be for like any new construction in that R5. It would just allow for some like additional flexibility, some additional room, maybe a very slightly larger building, especially if it's like a multifamily house. It might be like 2-row houses instead of just a single family detached house.
Right. So for a community like CB11, like what is the city of Yes proposing? Right, like let's say, give me a random street, like
80?
let's say Morris Park.
Sorry.
let's say Morris Park.
Yeah.
Let's say,
Order.
let's,
Morris Park one, yeah.
yeah, say Morris Park. Let's say, you know, the city of Yes passes, right?
Mhm.
What is the projected zoning change for housing in this strip?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's just have like a little hypothetical situation. We had like a vacant lot that's like right across the street here on Morris Park.
Mhm.
If this would pass, or let's say like if it didn't pass, like what could be built there today?
Right.
In all likelihood, it would just end up being like a strip mall, like a very like low scale, 1 story, just commercial strip mall. And that, but if this were to pass, then what would be like what could happen would be a ground floor commercial with like 1 to 2 stories of housing on top of it, a lot like what you see with the rest of the corridor itself. So That's
What's the zoning code for that though?
not sure off the top of my head, but it would be whatever, according to like whatever the existing district is. So it wouldn't change the actual district along.
So if it was an R4, it would remain in
Yes.
R4.
Right.
Exactly.
The only way that you can get the 20% bonus is if they agree to make it affordable housing. That could increase the floor
Yeah.
area ratios,
And that's only in R6 districts and above.
so not in
It wouldn't be in
R4s.
R4.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for
Good.
the UAP, for example, won't be something that Morris Park will see.
Not on like the Morris Park app.
So that's more like White Plains Road, Pelham Parkway.
Yeah,
those
so
areas.
yeah, when you go over to that side, that's like in those R6 districts, those areas would be eligible to do that. And again, new construction, like brand new building on like a vacant lot, then that would be allowed. And
Okay.
again, it would still be the underlying district. So in the guide there, we didn't have like time to get into it in the presentation. There's a chart that shows just like by each district, how much additional floor area and how much additional height would be allowed in each of those districts. So it's just like a small increase for each one to allow for those, 20% of additional affordable units.
And the UAP the UAP also, right? Let's say City of Yes passes. Have you guys thought about like what happens in regards to taxes, like property taxes?
Yeah, that's a question that's been coming up a lot. I believe there won't be a significant increase to taxes. It's only if there's more increase in taxes if like a proper or an area like rezone. So if it went from a particular district to a higher district or a change in district.
We go on.
The
Appraisal.
It does go up, yeah. And that also affects,
Mhm.
you know, the mortgage, it affects the property value and also for new home buyers. So like, in practicality without like the soft, that net to like a new credit or tax credit, you could be increasing the cost of housing that way, the cost of buying housing, no?
Yeah.
Or am I-
So it differs. So one of the things about the city of Yes that the mayor had learned is that in areas like this, a lot of the single family homes there, people can't age in place, right? But this would allow for you to actually possibly convert a lower level so that a parent now who wants to have their kids live on top could actually convert the bottom, right? Or let's say we do have some properties that have huge lots that actually could build a mother-in-law suite in the back. Now, of course, those properties would go up, right?
Right.
But it's also gonna go up in value, but not just a regular property that is as is.
Right.
So, and that's going on right now, so that a new building can come up and it is gonna affect the comps in the community.
Right.
But that property itself and that assessment is gonna be for that property itself.
Okay, so it's safe to say that if somebody does go that far to do the UAP, that they're looking to stay there for much longer, so they wouldn't really matter, right?
Most of the ones, especially in Brooklyn, where this was asked for, it really was brought on by people that wanted their kids to live in these communities, but couldn't. They have all this space, but they don't have they weren't able to get permits to even open the bottom. That's why there was a legal conversion, right? So they're trying to allow for these things to happen in our communities without all these restrictions and allow families to continue to stay in their communities and be able to affordably live in those communities.
But that increases the FAR when you add, like, for example, if you have a property and you're adding another structure to it, that FAR gets added onto the building, so that ties into
Yep.
the FAR in the R4 zone, for example. if you limit it and your building is at a certain point and you want to convert a garage into a house, that's part of the FAR of the existing zoning law,
Exactly.
right? So that zone, that FAR for that zoning lot, how do you, that's what you're saying, how do you now, if it stays at R4, how do you increase that zoning lot FAR for
Yep.
making that conversion of that garage?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So again, it's like we have a guide here that has a more like detailed breakdown by like district and how they'll change. But with this proposal, it would allow for that additional flexibility that up to allow that additional FAR for the ADU. So
Right.
that floor area for the ADU would be exempt from the overall FAR to allow it to happen
Oh, yeah.
because that's
So
one of the
you-
reasons why you can't. Yeah, that's why it can't happen today because then you would exceed the FAR for it. So.
And
And my other question is, like, once you have that area, right, you're adding more hardscape, right? You're losing, because I've done that, I'm an architect, you're losing more hardscape, so that's more stormwater runoff, right? Because you're adding more hardscape to it. How is that also being considered when now you have your combined sewer lines? You're adding another building, which more plumbing system in there and more walkways, so you're adding more hardscape.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that was examined in our environmental impact statement. We have our draft environmental
I
impact.
saw
statement.
some of that, but
Yeah.
it kind of alludes to it, but it doesn't really give a good analysis of what's going to happen when you have all of these buildings. If you do that in the future, have those hardscapes added to it.
Right, and that would only be for new accessory dwelling units, right? So
And it's
a
just
lot of
because someone can convert their garage, right?
right, but like the garage would already be there though, so
But
it's
you
like the
convert-
footprint is already there. So
But you're adding
Yeah.
hardscape because you have that walkways now too.
Yeah.
To get.
I'm also a little bit worried about apartment sizes. Now, I used to do real estate as a real estate agent, and I especially in affordable housing. And I know developers that has taken older buildings, like houses, updated to 2, 3 units, and then they reconstruct it, and it's small.
Mhm.
It's very small, right? And like I understand the need for creating more like 1-bedroom studios. I understand that. But I think that it may be giving a little bit too much leeway if there isn't an update in what the legal exception for apartment sizes are. So like, have you guys like analyzed that and say like making sure that apartment sizes are at a proper
It is a law.
with
yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like
That's that's a law that they break it, and when it's inspected, it's changed, but there is a law for a size of a bedroom unit.
yeah
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that-
and that would still remain in place too to
This
ensure that there's like a minimum size.
Any of the buildings code requirements or any other laws that govern what you can do where?
But I guess what I'm trying to get at is that the current law, that's on law, like that's small. Like I've seen what the bare minimum looks like, and that is a very small.
You're talking about the square footage of the
Yeah, the
apartment?
square footage, the height to the width, I've seen that. That's a very small apartment. And if we're allowing developers to come in and to just develop at that bare minimum, you're gonna get a lot of disgruntled people saying that my apartment is way too small. So like, have you guys gotten any feedback on that or any pushback to showing that maybe it's a little bit bigger than usual?
No, that's a good point to bring up. I don't think it's come up quite a bit though, but yeah, like Ted said that it's still enshrined in the New York City Building Code that at that absolute minimum. And also just a note about like the accessory dwelling units, it's that minimum to a certain maximum. It's a
Yeah.
maximum is 800 square feet for those. So just a quick note on those. But it would still be subject to that amount, but the minimum, but we want to allow for like more opportunities all over the place. So not just like those really tiny small units, but to provide range of also like 1-bedrooms and even more, 2 and 3, just more housing types of all sorts. So
So I'm just gonna interject for a minute. This is the takeaway that I would say. I noticed that the units are getting smaller, right? Which means that, you used to have a room for a dining room and a couch, and certain furnitures, and you no longer can have that. So furnitures are minimizing, but also we're losing the importance of a dining room. And in certain cultures, that's important and that's being taken away. And that's how the family gets separated. So while the city is worried about zoning and adding more space, it is also a program, a family component to it, right? Now, the one thing I would have to say in my line of business, what's needed is 3 and 4 bedrooms, not necessarily 1 and 2 bedrooms. So, because there's larger families, families are living more together, and we saw that during COVID. So how is that envisioned in the plan? And that may be a HPD question, but we do need some larger units.
Yeah.
And then I'm sorry, not to interrupt, but the air rights. So air rights won't play into when you're dealing with R10s and R6s, because no homeowner wants to give up their air rights unless they're being paid for it.
To answer that one first, I
Mhm.
believe the current rules around air rights are gonna remain the same with the
Okay.
exception of like the transfer of landmark air rights. So like if it's in a landmark building or historic
Okay.
district, changing the rules around that to allow more flexibility around those, but that's a bit set
Down the line,
like
okay.
the existing air rights, I believe are remaining the same, but in terms of like the actual like unit size, through this, we want to just increase like the opportunity for all types of housing, but including those. So we do want to facilitate like more like studio and bedroom apartments for those who actually do want any of the smaller units, but we also want to just encourage like housing production in general, including those larger units, and also, you know, getting people, like I said, who are in roommate situations, like who want to live by themselves out of like existing like 3, 4 larger sized units to free those up for the families that like really need them.
Okay.
And bring the cost down for those units.
What I've heard about Boston Road, 2560 Boston Road is, he's already gotten 25% increase in height for the affordable housing. He's gotten extra height for the community facility. Is he now going to get the extra 20% bump up from the city of Yes for more affordability, which would give him a 45% bump up?
No, that since that application has already come through and it's I believe it's been approved already, it's or it's
Rezoning.
yeah, the rezoning is approved, so that one's already completed through.
How
the,
is he getting
process.
70 extra units then?
I'm
We can look into
not
that.
sure yet.
Because he's only
Yeah.
putting the minimum amount of 2-bedroom apartments. It's all studios and 1 bedrooms, and they're gonna be 600 square feet for 1 bedroom probably, and 500 or less for the studios. Which is again what she's talking about, the small apartments. They're not gonna be family apartments.
But there, so, I mean, the city of Yes is based on really trying to help the housing crisis that we're in. That's really what's happening as well. This is a huge push because the way it stands right now, the law's not allowing for people to really build. Even, like I said, even we're talking about people who own their homes that even want to just build on their own existing land. So so what the city of Yes is really intentions on trying to help change some of the red tape that's been put on a lot of these building developments moving forward in the future. Yes, some of the places might be small, but they're all still got to go by code. They're not going to be able to break the laws that are there. The
This-
city of Yes doesn't have anything in
This
the plan.
community board is losing 3 supermarkets. One on Allerton, one on Boston, and it's lost the Stop and Shop on Eastchester Road.
That's because people are not shopping there. So that's a whole different issue, right?
Are you sure of that?
Well,
The Fine Fair is still open,
The
and
reason-
they're gonna rebuild.
the reason why most businesses are closing, even in my own community, is not because they want to close. It's usually because they're not getting enough people to come in and buy.
So
Or
that
shopping
would-
online.
Or shopping on, yeah, there's.
So that would include the commercial businesses. So yet you're pushing more commercial businesses while we have empty stores on White Plains Road.
Well, I'll correct that. I'll correct that. We have to look at these things not in the myopic view of what the economy was pre-COVID, right? We're post-COVID now,
Mhm.
right? So there are different needs, there are different shopping behaviors,
Correct,
there are different businesses.
correct.
So
And-
people, as Christine stated, people are shopping online more, right?
Correct.
So, a lot of these businesses are struggling to stay open because they're just not attracting the clientele to keep them open,
Correct.
right? In my bid, that's something that I've noticed.
Right.
But while there are businesses that are closing, there are new businesses that are opening. And a lot of the businesses that are opening that want to open just don't have the current zoning for that to happen. So it's not an indignation on the city of Yes. It's not indignation of anything else. It's just that economic patterns they will. And
Correct.
we're in an entirely different era right now. We have to recognize that as what it is.
Yeah, one of my concerns is the environment impact of the new buildings, right? You're having all this new construction is gonna add more CO2s, right? So concrete does and things like that. And some of these buildings are being built, I'm not sure they're being built to meet the new energy code, like passive type of construction, where you have a great amount of savings in the constructed structure itself, from the solar roof, solar panel, solar hot water, the passive wall construction, so you're not losing a lot of heat energy. So you can pass those savings on to the homeowners now. So once you have a really tight envelope, that building is not producing enough, not pulling so much energy from the grid, not putting so much electric from the grid, because once you do the solar panel and solar, all that stuff, the electricity goes down. And you can pass those savings on to the potential home buyer or co-op buyer.
Yeah.
Are you guys looking into things like that?
Yeah,
I may have
and
missed-
we
I may have missed that.
yeah, we already and then did that. Our first citywide text amendment was a city for carbon neutrality. So like that removed the zoning barriers to prevent like more for buildings to take on projects to make themselves more energy efficient and to help with like all of those things that you just mentioned. So that would complement this very well as new buildings would be constructed and hopefully incentivized to be constructed. They could also take advantage of those or take advantage of not having the same restrictions to, put in place all of those things that you just said. So
You started implementing like timber and wood, like because that, that kind of reduces the carbon impact on the building. If you can build some of these buildings out of, no, you can, out of mass timber. Because they've been doing it in other areas where they're building it out of mass timber, where it actually minimizes the draw of carbon in our community, which also helps the ozone layer, also help in future
This is something that you guys can present, right? So this is what this phase is about, right? It's not just the mayor saying, we're gonna do this. He really does want to make sure, and obviously the city council, you guys have the ability to add something like that and say, you know what? Listen, we're all for City of Yes, but we just want to make sure that maybe you add this to a requirement that any new building going up has this. That's why we're in this phase right now, coming to the boards and making sure when they're presenting to you guys, it's not just we're telling you what's gonna happen. We're saying you guys are gonna have an entire process where you're gonna be with the city council saying this is what we also want in addition to this, or this is what we don't want, right?
Now, the construction is a lot of carbon, all that construction is gonna have a lot of carbon.
So I appreciate, I just want to go to the gallery and let's see if they have any questions, and then I do want to move on to HPD. Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna open up the gallery. So everybody who wants to speak, forget 2 minutes to speak. I'll give you a 30-second warning. Mr. Muniz, 1 second. Where's my clock? I'm sorry.
That clock out.
Yeah, 100%. Timer. All right, Mr. Muniz, when you're ready, submit yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Frenchy Muniz. I do have some concerns because I'm not a homeowner, but I love the Bronx. And one of the reasons I love the Bronx is there's so much airspace and stuff like that. In my area right here by White Plains Road and Allington, we've seen a lot of buildings coming up without regards to parking. It's getting ridiculous. They just converted a two-family home into small studio apartments. They eliminated the parking spot that they had within the residence, converted it to studio apartments. And we lost that parking space right there. Additionally, the city's saying that we need more housing, but in reality, look, NYCHA right now has over 5,000 apartments empty, and it keeps increasing. We have landlords that are actually holding on to rent stabilized apartment over 3,000, in the city, and the city's not actually doing anything about it. They just want to put a Band-Aid. And I think we have to fix the root cause of the problem. Not only that, we also have Community Board 11 is also dealing with the Metro North expansion, and it's just complicating things more. We are losing a lot of residents. As a matter of fact, I was just going through the numbers. New York City since 2020 have lost over 500,000 residents. Hello? Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Yes, yes. Are you done?
Yeah, we have lost over 500,000 residents in New York City, according to the census. And, you know, the numbers keep piling up. So we are actually under 8 million residents for New York City and everything. You know, you bring in numbers that probably came up, you know, years back and everything, and not really at the current
Time?
you know, situation that's going on here in the city.
Mr. Muniz, thank you. Just, I just want, sorry, I just want to correct something real quick. While the city has lost residents, CB11 has had an influx in population within the last 5 years. And that, I know Serena Muniz, the chair of the community development, the West Priorities community, has presented on that before. So if you need that information, we can make that available.
Thank you for mentioning it. And thank you for those questions to start like in reverse order in terms of like the population decrease. I think Michael put it in the chat that people are one of the reasons why there is a population loss is like people just can't afford to live here anymore, and they're just picking up and leaving and going other places. So there's still people that actually want to live here but are being forced out even though they don't want to be. So that's resulting in a lot of this. But what in terms of like NYCHA and those rent stabilized apartments that are not on the market, it's again, this is through the zoning text amendment. It really can't address those concerns in particular. But zoning is just one piece of the puzzle. But in order to get at those particular issues, we need to come up with like an all hands on deck approach through other policy tools that are available through like HPD at the state level and other agencies that are also involved in this in NYCHA as well to address this concern. So it's a really great point, and thank you for bringing it up. But it's just one of the many ways that this housing crisis is affecting just everything across the city.
If I may, you can't overestimate enough, you can't overestimate the importance of the vacancy rate. The vacancy rate, it's always been fortunately under 5%, but usually it's like 3 to 4%. The vacancy rate now is only 1.4%, and that's citywide. Like you said, I think we said at the beginning, in the Bronx is less, but also for the lower incomes, for people who pay lower rents, it's even worse. You know, if you're somebody who can afford to pay $5,000 a month for rent, the vacancy rate is probably like 4 or 5%. But if you're somebody who can only pay $1,500, let's say you have a vacancy rate of 0 point something, and that's really what this is all about. The fact is, it's a supply and demand issue. The more supply there is, the demand is there. So the more supply that there is, then people have a choice. The point of what that vacancy rate means, 1.4% means that at any given time, only 1.4% of the housing stock is available, is vacant and available. And that's not a lot. And what it means is if you're somebody who can only afford the lower amount and you're looking for an apartment and you feel the building has an apartment at that rent, but maybe the guy wants to charge you $2,000. Well, you may feel forced to grab it rather than lose it because you have nothing else. You have no place else to look. If you're somebody who can afford to pay $5,000, $6,000, you know, and somebody wants to make it $7,000, you can stay the heck with you and you can down the street to a different building. So people who can afford a lot more have choice. People who can't afford a lot more don't. And that's really what this is about. That, you know, the slogan again is a little bit in every neighborhood. Well, then it's not going to totally solve the problem, but it's going to add enough units to make an impact.
So I'm just gonna say this and then we'll move on to HPD. I get that and I'm gonna continue. I get that and I understand that. I think one of the beautiful things about housing is that there's so many different views. I've done housing for about 30 years. So I've seen the corporate side, development side of it, and I've seen the community tenant side of it. And I have to say, there's a huge disconnect. So your want may not be what my want is. And I think the problem is that that's why I asked for the study and who was participating in that study. You really have to get to the neighborhood. You really have to pull those property managers in, right? Those landlords in, those NEP entrepreneurs in, those third-party transfer entrepreneurs in, those NRP entrepreneurs in, the city homes people that bought their homes in Harlem and Brooklyn within the special program. You really need to talk to them. And you really need to understand the other side, because I'm gonna tell you, landlords are scared. Because they're dealing with a tenancy bunch that they're losing money. And there's nothing that we can do on the legal tip. So there's different branches to it. It's not just about building, like I get what the mayor's doing and I understand it. But there's another key important component to it to all make sense. And that's where we really do need HPD. We really do need HPD and all those city agencies that are creating voucher programs and Section 8s. Because what you're having right now is landlords now want to capitalize on that and they want to maximize the rent. So the average person that can't afford, the middle person that can't afford that and can't get a voucher, because we don't know if the vouchers are going to be permanent. Because I've been through the voucher system when Bloomberg was mayor and he clipped it. And 14,000 families went back into the shelter. No landlord wants to deal with that. So I think when we discuss this, right, that's your one, city planning is one side of it, right?
Yeah.
It's beautiful, right? But I think the most important, where I'm coming from, is the program side of it. Because you can build affordable housing and people are scared of the word affordable housing because they don't want their neighborhood to change. What does that look like, right? Because let's use vets. Vets, housing. But you say, yes, a program is attached to support them, but then guess what? The nonprofit pulls out and the vets are left there and there's no support. You can't do that to a neighborhood. So although I commend what he's doing, I just pray and hope that he is understanding the other side to it. And you really do need to come into these communities and do a vision plan to really hear what these landlords are talking about.
So I just want to echo what you had stated earlier. So this is really why we're out at these community boards and in this initial phase of the process, is to hear from you guys. And it's really important for us to, like, whether you voted up or down, obviously we like you, but to hear from you, because those are really important points. And even though they may not be pursuant to the zoning and but those are important points for the commission, the city council, for everyone to hear, because even though this is part of this text amendment, you're bringing up things that are important to your community. So we want to continue to hear from folks. So I encourage you guys, as you deliberate and you put this together, to make points like that in your recommendations, because the city planning commission does see it, as does the city council.
I appreciate it.
And remember, the landlords that are raising the rent now is because of supply and demand, because they know there's nowhere else for you to go. So I'm going to be able to charge you $4,000 because I know that you're not going to be able to find anything else for $3,000 in the neighborhood. So if you want to be in this neighborhood, I'm going to charge you what I want. And then I'm going to decide who I want to be the best of. So then I'm going to choose, and I'll have 100 people that I get to choose from. When years ago, they would have 2 people. Right? So now it has changed, and that only goes based on supply and demand. The same reason why, like the real estate market, things are only up because there's nothing. But as soon as that everybody starts selling, the market's going to go down.
I hear you, but I think with that, the other side to that is we got to be careful who we allow to buy. Because there is a pattern of individuals who come into neighborhoods, buy buildings, maximize the rent, and then become slumlords. So again, that's a conversation, right? And that's the other part. See what I'm saying? There's so many different branches that we have to discuss it. And we have to be honest with it, because that's the other problem. Brooklyn saw it, right? Manhattan saw it, like they went through it. And it's still happening now because I say that because I'm dealing with a situation where my client is selling their cluster of buildings to someone who wants to maximize the rent. He doesn't even want to see anything but Section 8. That's unfair because now you've capped it. So when that person leaves, now you're saying you can't go down in the rent. you only can go up. It's not fair.
But maybe this is something that you guys as a committee would want to talk about and figure out how to, because remember, we're just here for the City of Yes part of it, right? But the City of Yes part does actually have a big implementation on that, because even before, at least now more people can at least make determinations of different things that can come into a neighborhood. Period, right? Because the mayor has talked about this time and time. He actually discovered, he didn't know, because this is something that he's a reader and he does a lot of research. There's 59 community boards covered in New York City. 9 community boards are the only ones that have been developed, that are actually been taking the brunt on all of the redevelopment because of zoning. And what he's saying is that it's if everybody, if with the City of Yes, that means every little community, not overdeveloping, not saying there's going to be skyscrapers and all these other areas, but at least everybody will be able to have their share of bringing into what's needed to keep our city more, affordable and being able to continue to grow and have people able to come back. So it's a big thing, but that's why we're here. And I think this is great that you guys are bringing it up, and you have the opportunity now to, come back together and then say, with the entire board, and then you guys will be with your elected and say, this is something that we think. In addition, yes, we want the City of Yes, but we want to make sure, can you add this, or can you shift this around a little bit? And that's what this is all about.
Okay, Lena, so why was the City of Yes for economic development and housing opportunity included in the Metro North rezoning even before the city council voted on either one of them? And we heard now they're not going to vote till the end of the year on the housing, yet it was included in the Metro North rezoning. Why?
I wasn't a part of the Metro North rezoning, I just worked for the city.
Yeah.
I know. And Malcolm, it's now more than 31 days. Has city planning met the 21 stipulations?
I actually did speak to city planning after borough boards last week. This week, last week. I'm sorry. Last week. I did speak to them. And we do have to go. Yeah, they come back, but it's still.
So they haven't met it.
Whoa, relax. It's still. You still have to go through the ULIP process. It's not done yet. You still have to meet borough boards went. Now we're going to city council. We have to meet our city council members. We have to go through the ULIP process. There's a process, right? So let's go through the process. Let's figure it out, and then we'll see what we got to do there.
But they
Right,
have
but as I stated at the last full board meeting, that if the conditions are not met, just due to the city charter, the yes conditional vote is a no.
I
Right?
think the board should reinforce that.
Well, I mean, the city charter is law. Nothing that we can do to enforce it, but we need to do our work through the ULIP process. I understand the reactiveness, I understand the anger, I understand the angst, the anxiety, but there's a process that we do have to work through, and we have to ensure that as a community board, and as a
Malcolm,
community.
the city planning liked the community board 11. They added it in.
All right,
Okay.
let's do it.
Let's deal with that on
We can do
another
that,
level.
we can deal with that off.
But I do want to move on to HPD because it is 7:30 and I don't want to keep people here so late, so. I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
just want to comment on the City of Yes.
Hold on 1 second. I gotta do some minutes, guys.
He's tired.
All right, go ahead.
Ready? Okay.
So first, I wanted to say this was a much better presentation than the one we got last week from an independent person who came in. And, this is important because we do have a housing shortage, and most housing that's built in New York is as of right. So this is the best possible avenue to increase the housing supply. Now, it is important to emphasize, because there is a lot of, fear mongering that, our neighborhoods are going to change drastically. But, it doesn't force anything. And we've seen this before. In 2006, the city did a rezoning of Pelham Parkway and Indian Village. Now, that was a net down zoning, but there was a slight upzoning on Pelham Parkway and on 6 block spaces on Williamsbridge Road. That on Williamsbridge Road was to R5D. And there was a lot of fear about that, a lot of opposition. Because people were convinced that hundreds of units of housing were going to be built. And city planning projected over 10 years that about 30 units would be built. After 18 years, you know how many new buildings are on that section of Williamsbridge Road? 0. No new buildings. So all this drama about how the neighborhood was going to be destroyed, that was Senator Jeff Klein's statement, did not pan out. And I think by doing these City of Yes changes, that maybe the property owners who own property on Williamsbridge Road might actually decide that, hey, maybe it's finally worth it to put some housing here.
30 seconds.
Thank you.
Can I say something to what he just said? Since I live on Williamsbridge Road?
Quick, Bob, quick.
There's a gas station there up for sale, but the man wants $2 million. Nobody wants to pay for it. That's the problem. Prices are too high on Williamsburg Road.
Is that, are you guys what say?
Oh, no, I'm with.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, no.
So do we have any
It- it's-
more presentations or this is it? Done?
No, I was just going to say, you heard, and there's a lot, this seems to be like a campaign of fear, right? Driving people and driving this narrative. Do you want to respond to any of that stuff that you heard?
On what
What Bob had to say?
So I will say this, so I will
Agreed.
say, so we didn't lie. If you look at our presentation materials, we highlighted where we were indicated, where we incorporated City of Yes for zoning for economic opportunity and housing opportunity. We knew full well that both of these proposals would be on parallel tracks, and we knew that that question would come up. It's also important to note that when you do environmental review, we analyze the worst case scenario. So what you have in the Metro North proposal right now is the worst case scenario. And when I say worst case scenario in terms of like, what is the ultimate limit of what could be built and developed pursuant to the proposal that incorporates everything that we're talking about in the city of Yes. So
Not what actually will happen.
yes, so yeah, exactly. So it's like, this is the maximum, but again, Michael just pointed to a proposal where, they projected 30 units and nothing happened. So again, we do best estimates based on environmental review and the proposal, and we go from there. But sorry, go ahead.
I'm just gonna, if I can add something to that. What zoning does and doesn't do. Zoning says what you can do, it says what you can't do. It doesn't at all say what you must do. There's no such thing. And I said this, I spoke in front of your committees, last month, I guess it was, about the Metro North. And I said, that there'll be property owners who will grab this, who will take the $2 million or whatever it is, that this big offers them, and they'll do that and they'll retire and get out. And then there'll be others who say no, and we're gonna find 60 years from now, their son or daughter is still running the business. So there's no matter, I don't believe personally that any one of the things in this, remember that the slogan here is a little bit of everything. Because I don't believe that any one thing here is so impactful, so dominant as to make a major change. But the hope is that all of these things together, a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there, is gonna make a dent in the crisis that we have. And again, I go back to it, it's a supply and demand thing, and something has to be done to increase the supply.
So,
To build on that point, just to go back to that hypothetical example, we talked about like if something were like developed on like Morris Park Ave. So like if it was on a lot that was about the size of like this here, just the same width, it would end up resulting in maybe like 4-6 units of housing, and then that would be it, since of course like Morris Park Ave is already mostly built up. So, but if you take that into account, like every little bit like that across New York City, the entirety of New York City, which is a huge city, then we can start to see like.
that's why Park Justice Condominium is gonna get rid of the 2 garages and build two buildings higher than the 17-story building proposed for East Tremont and Unionport. Okay, and here we have 1601 Bronxville, 18 stories, which is an M1 zoning currently,
What is the problem?
2,083 units of housing.
Did I answer that? You started with something about Park Just One. What is wrong with Park Just One?
Nothing, it's just that the current height is what, 12 stories, not 17?
I think that's a good
It's a little, I'm not saying anything bad, if that's what they want, that's fine. But, you're taking a community board that has currently almost 1,000 units in construction or being constructed, including two 200-unit homeless shelters, single men's homeless shelters, and a 200-bed hotel that's been built on Stillwell Avenue. So that's 600 units there, plus whatever's going up in Allerton, that's going up and is going up. So you have about 1,500 units in the pipeline, or
You're mixing permanent housing and shelters. It's two different things.
I think this the Bronx Metro North study and rezoning, I think that's it's a good example, since you've already seen that and familiar with that, and how that differs from the City of Yes like housing opportunity text amendment, because that was an actual like rezoning. That's not what's happening with the text amendment. That's something, it's different, actually.
Mr. Phillips admitted to the Bronx delegation when questioned that yes, we added the 20% bump up in the City of Yes in the Metro North, rezoning.
But let me be clear, there's no way in the middle of the process we can add it. We were we had many conversations, we were very deliberate about, because we knew we were working on City of Yes for housing opportunities coming up. And we made the distinct a decision to make sure that we incorporated, because they were coming on parallel tracks.
When did it pass the council? When
It's-
did
it's
it pass
part-
the city council?
It's a proposal, Robert. It's part of a proposal. It's in public review right now. And so nothing has
It's here on
passed.
paper.
Wait, yeah, but, you
So
know.
let me say this, and I guess this will kind of be my last comment, and then we can call it a night. Change is never easy. And I think what we see here happening in the Bronx, because, and I've said it before, because the Bronx has never gone through the amount of development that Brooklyn has and Harlem has. You're feeling it now.
And it's not as big.
And it's not as big, and trust me, I went through it with Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy, Brownsville. I was in the trenches of it all when it was happening. And we went through some stuff. And I've always said, for Community Board 11, you have to be on the up and up, and you have to know what's happening. Because when development starts, it's coming. My only thing is, I've always looked to have more senior housing because we don't have that. We don't have that across the boroughs. We need more senior housing. The only thing that I do say as well is, if you have affordable housing and when it comes, please be mindful that it's attached to a program, that there's social services involved to support those tenants. I also think part of the issue, it's not about parking so much, it's about a cultural change. Because the Bronx has certain cultural pockets. And now that you want to come into the neighborhood, communities are like, not in my backyard. I don't want that. I don't want my neighborhood to change. I'll be the first one to tell you, I'm even thinking about leaving my block that my parents bought their home in 1967. Why? Because my kids can't go out and play because there's no kids on the block. The neighborhood has changed. So it's not just about, there's one story that continues to sell, but I say that there's multiple branches on why people are leaving. And so all of that needs to be part of the story and the talking points, right? So that we can get to a common ground. But the pushback that you're seeing has a lot to do with culture, has a lot to do with security, has a lot to do with not in my backyard. And we have to answer those questions. We have to be honest and we have to bring it to the table. Is houses now, up in price? Absolutely. But I think folks are also worried when it comes to the property tax, that we are not seeing what Westchester saw, that we don't get the increase in tax like Westchester has, right? Who can pay $16,000? If you live in Hartsdale, your taxes are $16,000 and up. We can't afford that here. So all of that has to be looked at, and all of that has to be part of the conversation.
It definitely does.
And that's a good point to bring up to how big this issue is, that it's a regional issue, because like Westchester, Nassau, Suffolk, all the other counties, they're not producing a lot of housing either.
No.
And of course, outside of our control, but like that's a factor here. Actually, Jersey has been producing a lot, I've heard. And that's why people.
Absolutely.
What you just said, I mean, it's.
And then we-
Yeah. Oh, because
It's one of the main things that people have to complain about, right? Your parents bought a house 60 years ago. Luckily, you were able to come back, but there's so many other people, some of those other people that live on that block that are older, their kids couldn't afford to come back because there is no affordability coming home. They weren't able to turn their second floor, where they could build, they're not even able to convert it to have them come back. And that's sort of like, I know there's a lot of different parts of the city of Yes, but that is one of the biggest huge impacts, is because we have communities like Throgs, we have communities like Morris Park that want their kids to come back, who would love to be in this neighborhood. They cannot afford it and there's no place for them to go. So the only thing that could also be a great opportunity is if they were able to take that house that they have and build up or build in the back. And then maybe those same kids that graduated and made income would like to put it back into their community so their kids could be living together.
So I have a question, and I don't know who can answer this, but, right, we're talking about conversions, right, like garages and basements to legal
basements.
apartments. So there's something just recently happened, right?
On the 29th, they passed.
Right.
Right.
They passed, what is it exactly and who is excluded? Because I'm hearing a lot of that conversation.
The basement, the no flood
Yeah.
zones, right?
Yeah, so there's what's included in like our proposal here with the housing opportunity proposal. There's also a program at the state level which just passed, like a pilot that's only eligible in certain
In certain
community
districts.
districts.
Are we
Yeah.
in that community where we're excluded from it?
Don't remember off the
Not
top
all
my
of
head.
it, not all of CB 11 is included.
State budget,
Uh-huh.
includes
Yeah.
a program, a new program to do this, to help out with this, among other things.
Right,
The map that I saw has 4 community districts in the Bronx, including this one. It's big,
so we're eligible for this
I
program.
don't know how that program's gonna work, brand new program.
Right, it's a pilot program, but again, but the state is helping homeowners to convert their apartments into legal, I mean, their basements into legal.
Well, see, that's what we need to
Okay.
know, the services, right? So
Yeah.
with this massive construction that you are able to
I
do.
would like to know also, how that then plays in with what we HPD are doing for that. One of the questions I asked was, we're there because we have a lot of different privacy programs.
Right,
So I said, suppose somebody has a one-family house and they have a big backyard and they want to add a unit, like, through the AD.
Right.
But are we gonna have a program to help people finance that? Or is the presumption that it's gonna be just people on their own? There are people right now who are trying to figure out if we could have a financing program to do that kind of thing as well.
That's when neighborhood housing services should get involved. All of those different key components, those agencies. Again, it's not just about building it. It's about what you're gonna do to support the individuals that are there. As a homeowner, I feel like we're the forgotten ones. Because where is the support? I want to put, what do you call that, solar panels on. I just don't know what company that's legit, right? So it's good if the homeowner knows what's going on, what the incentives are, because I would love to do that.
We have a homeowner assistance program that it started off as a pilot project in District 12, but it's spreading now. We're getting more funding, it's spreading. So, and that's something I think somebody from our division that's told Jeremy about it. So, if not, then we can do that.
Yeah, please send that information back on to Jeremy so we can disseminate that to all the members.
If I remember correctly, remember I had a client, this landlord, who asked me about this program. There used to be a pilot program for city basements. For like, I think it was in East New York, where homeowners was able to convert their basements into like apartments to house people. I think it would be maybe be beneficial to see if we track. I don't know if you guys have that, the study or the data to see how that how that was implemented and how it looks in fruition. So then we could take and look at it ourselves and see whether or not the ADU, how it would look for us.
Without question, under the accessory development unit, the ADU, you're not just gonna be able to just go and build. You're gonna have to get the building department permit. That's like you were doing it for many other places.
Yeah, because there's an egress issue, there's a height issue, there's an air requirement issue.
It's like, you can't just like, it's a size.
no, I get it, yeah, no, I get it. With basements, you gotta have,
Oh, yeah, that.
and then egress, right.
We can look into, I think that program you're talking about was part of the East New York plan. We can reach out to our colleagues to see like what.
One of the other things, just, I'm not sure if it was mentioned, is that you guys have the worksheets, the checkbook.
We got an email.
Yeah.
Okay, it's, each community board to vote, it's gonna be like an all or nothing. Okay, I'm in favor of, city yes or against city yes, what conditions you think work well. But there's a worksheet that lists all the component parts, about 20 of them.
Right.
And every community board can just put down the list and talk about, are we in favor of this one? Are we in favor of this one? Are we in favor of that one? Yes, no. So you may find that, and I'm not up to number 20, I haven't counted. But if, let's say it's around 20, you may find that your board actually thinks that 18 of these make sense. And then you got one of them say, we recommend approval of this with the condition that number 6 and 12 are changed.
Like we do with the Metro North.
Yeah, so I think we'll do that.
So I think what ad hoc would do, we would charge the committees with that. So I saw that
And
spreadsheet.
you have the spreadsheet.
Yeah, the spreadsheet, yeah. So we can send that out to all committees and charge them with a deadline to say, please fill this out. And then as ad hoc, you can compile it all together
Edgar,
and come up with that.
absolutely. Edgar and I did create a Google form.
I saw that.
Yes.
Okay.
So Edgar and I created a Google form that we wanted to distribute out to the community as a blast. So people in the community could fill it out and just know like what their concerns are. Yes. what change they'd like to make, what they support. And then we'll come back to the board and we'll look at the data and say, all right, well, this is how we need to structure our votes, how we need to structure our conditions in our letter.
Yeah, but I think what's to be a forefront of the community, you know, we really need to look at the carbon reduction that we need to try to add to these. Because that's future generations, right? And you really need to consider, it's like we have a meteorite coming to our, and that meteorite is global land. And I'm telling you right now, if we don't try to implement some type of way to reduce carbon monoxide reduction, CO2, we're going to be in trouble in the future.
That was a carbon neutrality.
I know, but we need to try to, even with these new buildings that are going up, these new buildings that are going up are going to create more CO2s than the other because they're building concrete, brick, and aluminum. Those are the biggest producers of CO2s.
Right.
And you'll be able to put that on there, because they have the whole
What is
thing.
the, so I know the carbon neutrality is one thing. That's with, you know, getting rid of gas and getting rid of probably even having generators. But you really gotta look at the construction methods of the buildings that are going up. I mean, this is a very serious issue. It's a very serious point. You may think like we're gonna die, but then what are we gonna leave our future generation? It's a serious matter, and a lot of people don't realize how serious this is.
I do. There's also, correct if I'm wrong, local law 72. Remember that? You guys should know about that, maybe? I'm not too sure. But it's in local law 72 also deals with the carbon filtering and carbon footprint. So I think that's something that's a board we should definitely look at.
Yeah.
97.
97.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
I was like, 97.
Yes.
And that's a good point about bringing up Global Law 97.
97,
That with that past text amendment, that's a good thing to note here that too is that through the past two text amendments, that through this process and through the letters that were submitted, that changes were made to both of those proposals for carbon neutrality and economic opportunity. So that's why we really appreciate you actually coming out and sharing your thoughts, and that kind of the proposal isn't final until the city council. So, you know, through this process, like, you know, we do hear and we do see those comments that you'll have. So,
Yeah,
and
the mass market now is as strong as steel. The way the technology you can build things, especially when we're not out of mass and the whole thing. Believe it or not.
Well, we're gonna include all of that, and this is not the last meeting that we're gonna have, because we have the public hearing as well.
So, are you guys going on summer sabbatical? Because I know that was one of the other community boards did mention that, well, they're gonna take May to work with the committee and their community board. And they'll probably be presenting it in, June, right before you guys go for summer session. Because I think with the timeline with the 60 days.
Right, it runs
you know,
into it.
yeah, it runs into it, yeah, so.
Like it'll officially end in like early July, which is like you guys are on.
You're right, yeah.
So I'm not going on sabbatical.
All the community. Huh?
Your next step.
Public hearing, yeah, public hearing. So I think we might structure it. We gotta speak to Veronica about it. But I think what might happen is that we might structure the same we did in Metro North, public hearing, immediate leadership meeting to go over the conditions and the vote, and then come to the full board. But between that time, I think it might be the same process over some of the members of the board, me included, will probably write the letter out to present to the board. Or after our vote, write the letter out and have it sent to DCP and other agencies. So it might just be that. So I know that we're looking to get this done effectively and efficiently.
By the deadline.
By the deadline. That's the important thing, the deadline. So if the deadline is in July.
It's in July.
Yeah, it's like the first week.
Your 60
Like,
days
that's
is gonna
okay.
be
It's like,
July.
Yeah, so we have passed next month. Yeah.
So we can start writing something to draft this so that
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like we're all doing it at one point. Or with the carbon piece, you should definitely write something out and submit it to Malcolm so we can,
I'll write it and submit it, but.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
No, but it could be bullet points. It
Yeah.
could be your thoughts and just put it all and make it make sense. But I think, Bob, you know, we all will be charged with something. to do
Laura and
something.
I are in the housing committee. We can, take care of those things. But then you're not on housing? I thought he was on housing. I'm sorry,
I'm housing.
your housing,
Yeah.
okay. We're all on one of those teams, right? But whatever, I mean, we can work those out in the land use committee.
Right, collaboration is
And then-
key.
Definitely.
Submit those to their,
Well, we're gonna charge all the committees to write out something and submit it
I
to
love
ad
it.
hoc, because each committee should have something to say. Their voices should be heard, and, you know, we'll do it that way, and it will be done.
Yeah.
So I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for coming out.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
We said a couple of times you wanted to talk about something on HPD. What did you
Yes,
talk about?
Well, I just wanted to, the other part of this whole thing is the support, right? So maybe we can discuss that maybe next month or so, just the support that's gonna be given to all of the housing when it's done. You know, and maybe that may not be something that HPD is able.
I mean,
to
I'm HPD.
do. No, I,
But,
right, so I
Sit
don't know.
down.
I don't know if that's something that HPD will be able to discuss, because it's, you know, it's a lot of pieces to that.
All right, I mean, we have, well, I would say HPD, when it comes to new construction, HPD basically does three things. We provide land when it's available, not much city on land available yet. We provide financing in various types for various types of housing. And we provide various types of tax incentives, which are probably in a way sometimes the most important.
Right.
And so when somebody says they own a piece of property, then and they want to come in and use one of our programs, to do affordable housing, say terrific, you know, this
Feasibility.
program makes sense. and
Right.
things. We also, of course, there are some city-owned properties left. And so, but at this point, our financing programs go more to privately owned properties than they do to city-owned properties. Because you know, everybody has this image of South Bronx in particular, you know, that'd be just blocks and blocks and blocks of vacant land. If you see a vacant lot anywhere in the
I
block,
know.
There's
Right,
a,
this-
there's a story behind it.
it's probably not city-owned. Or if it is, it's probably already designated for a program. So, and so that's what we do. I'm not a director of Bronx planning. So my job is to help figure out, using these programs, the HPD programs, what makes the most sense to do at which location.
how many programs are available now to help developers?
Oh, we have one that's basically for very low income. We have one that's for mixed
They have a
income.
whole
We have one
page.
for doing home ownership. We have one for doing seniors. We have one for doing special needs like supportive housing.
Yeah.
Each of those are separate programs.
It's more than 20 different, right? 20.
But I'm just talking new construction.
Oh, okay, because I know there's a whole spreadsheet of like
Yeah, programs.
checkerboard, see where you fit in, yeah.
You know, building like, you know, in the Bronx in particular, there's a tremendous amount of housing was built in the 1920s. So that's 100 years now. So, you know, a lot of these buildings, the systems, it's like the body, something has to go. So fortunately, like in the 1980s, 1990s, a lot of the buildings put in windows, they put in plumbing, the wiring, but still, a lot of them still need work. And so we have that's another division that we have, they provide financing, low income, low cost financing for preservation. The new construction, you know, there just hasn't been much in this district, but in
Right.
other areas, like in the South Bronx and the West Bronx, you can't walk for a few blocks without seeing a building that's built for programs. What's happening now, which I'm not thrilled about, is that a lot of buildings are being built without us.
Right.
You know, that were being built without city financing.
Right,
And the reason
so
I'm
they
not
can
happy
do
with
whatever they
that
want
is that they're not. being
without the
supported.
program,
You know, like when you go down, we always talk about, if you go down to Deegan, go south of 138th Street,
right?
Oh, yeah,
between 138th Street and 30th Bridge, there's all these towers. that-
yes.
Not one of them is using up program.
Really?
Why?
So.
Whatever they want.
Charge them $5,000 a month.
But this is why in certain areas, community land trust is important, right? And this is why community land trust is important, because in East Harlem, we started a community land trust. So that the affordability is attached to the land. So you can demolish that building, but if you want to put something back up there, you must have the affordable housing component to it.
And we're working on financing for, there's a cluster of sites in the, mostly it's in Ward 1. There's a building in the site in Ward 4 that's going to be done as a co-op
Okay,
with CLC.
right,
You know, the problem is a lot of, we don't pay 100% of anything.
right,
We supplement construction costs.
right,
And that's what keeps the costs down so that you don't have to charge $5,000.
right,
So, but that means that the city money is supplementing bank money. For every one of the buildings that gets built through our programs, has some kind of private funding. A lot of the banks, they're not convinced about CLCs yet. It's hard.
Right, yeah, yeah. I'm surprised it went through when it did, but I was happy
Because
that
in Ward
it,
6, there's plus the 3 sites that are working with a community-based group.
right.
And then they're gonna do that as a co-op as well, in the CLC.
A not-for-profit is gonna build, it's a developer. Wow.
Well, they're working with a professional developer because they themselves don't have the experience.
Experience.
Right, but they're, yeah, got it.
But it's very important, for the community.
I like that co-op thing,
That's the one thing
providing
that's-
more home ownership opportunities is also a thing that a lot of our constituency here, right, want to see.
A lot of developers are not going to go through HPT property because that means they're limited to what they can charge tenants. The developers that I know are not going to go through.
Right, because they want to duck the law of the land.
You know, that's when I started coming back to the meetings here. Because about a year and a half ago, Hazel, who I know for about 30 or 40 years, said to me that there's all these new buildings being built between White Plains Road and Bronx Park East, between Pelham Park and Allen. There's a bunch of new buildings gonna be built.
Yeah.
And she said, can we do that? What do we have to do? What do we know about them? Again, not one of them is using our program.
It's a right.
But that's why,
It's still-
about a year ago, I don't know which of you were, I know you were there. We did a presentation to the Joint Housing and
I was
Maintenance Committee about our programs and how we work.
And that's the scary part, because when you have private developers coming into communities like ours and building buildings and not being able to report, it becomes a situation.
But I think you guys have to look at it a different way. You guys are the community, and I think that you need to maybe have a conversation with your elected, right? Because they write bills about things, right? So maybe if you guys feel that this is something that you should be having a conversation with your local electeds and saying, hi, this is what we would like to propose, right? Because I mean, that's what we're built off of.
Yeah.
I know we have policy for a lot of stuff that we wouldn't even know about, right? So maybe this is the conversation that you guys are, I mean, obviously we're here for the city of Yes. And we've talked about extra things, but now you understand that these developments also are not, they don't have anybody to answer to, right? But we could just see how the city is shifting. A lot of people have to start answering to people, right? The council put in a whole policy that made the agencies have to answer to the community. So I think when you guys look at it, maybe this is something that you guys want to just start to expand and say, you know what? Maybe we need to really sit down as a board and say what we want to present and bring to our local electeds and ask them, if this is something that they can present. And then what they would do, they present it and then they'll see if other councils and other communities are supporting on it. That's how they pass bills. That's how legislation is made. So I think you're thinking about it the wrong way.
I think we do have to put our foot down when it comes to that, but there are some political officials that love development. And they are quite aware of what's going on, but.
And there's some that
And some that are not, but I think we, the community board, need to start putting the pressure on and really speaking up, because far too long, we have not. And I think now that we found our voice, we need to exercise it and not back down.
The mayor who runs the city had to communicate with his officials. He had to go, that's the local assembly. He had to ask, please, can you give us the power and to work and do something about the illegal smoke shops? He's gone to the officials and said, please, can you do something about bail reform? I don't want you to take it away. Can you change it a little bit? So if you see the head person of all the city agencies, our mayor, going to local electeds for things, about things that need to have policy and legislation change, you guys can do it too.
True, we can and we will.
I know you guys.
I'm not worried about that.
But I thank you all for coming out.
Thank you, guys.
Please get home safe. Have a good night, and we will get back to you when our next meeting will be.
You have a date for the public hearing?
We don't, not yet, but we will have it.
Oh, it's done.
Let you know.
Yeah, motion.
We need a motion?
No, you must.
Oh, yeah.
You'll sign out?
Yeah. Have a good night, everyone. Good night, you guys. Good night.
Natalie,
Thank you. Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.